Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Meet the Mentor. My name is Patricia Roncone, and I'm here with Dorrie Rifkin. I'll be navigating her group starting May 13th, and I'm excited to be here this evening to see Dorrie's demo on typography and watercolor. Just a little bit about Dorrie. She has 33 years of experience as an award-winning art director, and her love for typography is clearly seen in her cityscapes. Her work has appeared in several juried exhibits, both internationally and in the States, and she has won awards in these juried shows. Dorrie's work also features her other passions, music, New York City, and family, and every painting has a personal story. She's a signature member of various watercolor societies, such as Transparent Watercolor Artist Magazine and the Northeast Pennsylvania, Philadelphia Garden State Watercolor Society, New Jersey. And in 2023, Dorrie became a master signature member of the Baltimore Watercolor Society. She was featured in magazines such as Ones to Watch, Watercolor Artist, and her work has appeared in Splash from 2014 to 2020 and on the cover of Watercolor Artist magazine. Dorrie also teaches local classes in New Jersey, workshops, and throughout the US, and online classes. So welcome, Dorrie. I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you for people that are joining us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, so I'm just gonna start off by sharing. Can we share the screen? I'll just show a few paintings.
Sure.
And okay, should I just let me see? Share screen. Here we go. So I only do watercolors. And the ones that I'm showing you are basically with type. And to me, type shows a certain time. It gives a little bit to a story. And so that's why I usually add a lot of type to my paintings. See, here's another one from New York, and the reason I paint New York is I live in New York. I live by New York, so it's always been my home. And also the thing is that what always fascinated me about New York is that I'm a mama's girl. So the same streets that I walked on, my mom walked on. And the idea that the city never it changes, but it doesn't change, always fascinated me. Here's another one. These type of paintings are more like labor intense. And I'm going to stop there. They usually take me an embarrassing amount of time. Like I could work on a painting anywhere from about 6 hours to 6 months. So it's but that's why I teach and do other things, because if I had to think about that to make a living, when I sell it, I would be crying all the time. So should I go on to the demo or any other?
Oh, no, we can talk a little bit more about your journey. How did you go from being, an art director to a watercolor artist?
Yeah, I was lucky. I mean, I loved being an art director. I went to school, University of Delaware, to be an art director. But back when I was a kid, there were no computers or things. So when my mother, who was also creative, when she wanted to go anywhere when I was a little kid, her way of doing it is that she just gave me some paints, and that way she could do whatever she wanted. So hi, Anne. Hi.
Oh, welcome.
So I got. I'm going to use my few Yiddish words. I got verkauft for a second. I don't know what the word means, but so anyhow so that was like, I always painted on the side. Like it wasn't like one, and I always used watercolors because I was a slob and my mother knew it, and it's very easy to clean. And I'm still trying to get it right. When I was like first, like I was really good with as a graphic designer, I went to the computer, I was like, yay, I could do Photoshop. I even started teaching Photoshop. I was able to transcend into it all because like when I started, there was no computers. But then
Mhm.
um I got to a point when it came web design and like I just couldn't do it anymore. And I took a workshop, and at the same time I met my husband. And I took a workshop with John Solomon, and if I call him I call him the Bruce Springsteen of the watercolor world. Like I even said to so during the workshop, he went to me, he goes, I liked you, he liked my stuff. So if you want to know how to not like a workshop, have your mentor tell you you're pretty good. Went home, and then I got an email, I got a letter from Watercolor magazine. They said somebody recommended you for article once to watch. And I, and I go, are you sitting down? Because I knew I took 2 workshops that year. They go, it was John Salomon.
Wow.
So, and so like, and he has like, I've taken a few other workshops with him. I
Mhm.
still like, he's still, all he has to say to me is give me like a little remark like that, and I'm like sky high.
Mhm.
So then at the same time, I met my husband and we were dating. And I went to him, I said, what would you think if I retire from advertising and I switched to watercolors? What I was saying to him is, what would you think if I live off of him? But he didn't hear that. And like even to this day, he goes, you really didn't think you're gonna get a job in watercolors? I go, it's watercolors. What are you nuts? And I just got very lucky because that's like through like I'm half retired, but basically people just kept giving me opportunities. And like
Mhm.
and I think ignorance works very good. Like I wouldn't tell a 20-year-old to go into watercolors, but when you were 50 and you're ignorant, and like I would just enter shows, I would enter contests, and I was very lucky and I kept getting into things. I didn't even know what they were. And that's kind of how I started. And like even when it came to teaching, because like I stutter a little bit, but like except when I talk about watercolors. And even now I'll probably talk a little bit as Pat will have to get me back on track because I'll get
No problem.
sidetracked. And so I just, one day somebody I said to me, would you like to teach a class of watercolors? And then sure. And I just kept saying yes. Not and that's how it got started. I mean, I don't think there's a watercolor you. I think you learn most art. You could major in art and do all that, but you learn from screwing up and messing
Mhm.
up, and that's how you learn how to do watercolors. When you're okay with failure, then you have a better chance of doing this. Um,
Mhm.
because I always laugh at my students because they're all wonderful people, and I don't have children, but they've had children, they've had amazing lives, but they go to the piece of paper and they're terrified. And I'm like, this is just a piece of paper. I said, I don't know about raising humans, but I think that's you could really mess that up. Here you just throw it away and and it's done. So, you know, that's kind of my story. I keep saying it. I will keep doing this until I get it right because it's always something to learn, and that's what fascinates me. Also, is that
Mhm.
learning part. The mentoring part is like this is. I have, like I said, I've been so blessed that so many people along the way have just taken me aside and said, "Can we help you?" That it's just time to pay it back. I mean, I it's it's basically been very, very lucky
Yeah,
how
and we're really happy that you're here to mentor us and mentors do make a big difference in someone's process and their artistic journey. And that's what Mastrius is all about. So, it's a perfect fit that you're here, and we're happy to have you here.
It's
Sorry?
you. Yeah, no, keep going. You're going to direct me and keep me on track.
Oh, no.
That's
No, we're very happy to have you here. And then, mentoring is very important. And with watercolor as well, yes, as a watercolorist myself, it is a difficult medium. But as you said, it's just paper. It's not precious. So that's the part you have to keep learning and keep doing it. And you'll have more paper on the floor than you'd have pieces, because it's something that you have to relearn and you have to throw out and keep going at it until you find your hand in it, till you develop a hand.
and I think
So
for
no one
me,
should be afraid.
yeah, and I think like you for me, like I started was when I was 4. So I
Mhm.
nobody's afraid at that point. But if you watch a
No.
kid paint and how they're fearless and they don't care, that's those are your real mentors. Because
Hmm.
like I had one student went to me, she was 90 years old, and like she looks at me, I'm so scared. I'm like, you're 90 years old. I go, why? You know, just, you got to use that paint up, because if not, your grandchildren are going to sell that paint for $1 or $2. So use it, or they're not, they're gonna throw it all away.
Hmm.
So, and like because I always say that about my husband, and like saying, don't you keep this stuff, like, because I could just see him, like all this paint I have. I said, give it to somebody, give my paintings to somebody if I go first. But I'm not thinking of going anywhere soon. But anyhow,
So would you like to start with the demo?
I will.
And and it's okay if we ask you questions along the way.
I love that. I work best when people ask me questions, and you know,
Enjoying the video? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when new Masteries videos are added.
I think one of the questions I have for you is, where do you take your own pictures when you look for inspiration or
I
references?
when I that's a great question. And when I paint if I'm good for myself, I always use my own photographs. It's
Hmm.
really important that it's your life, and like if you're painting for your life, it's going to be special. If you use somebody else's photographs, or if you use um somebody else's painting, you're not going to be able to have a feeling to it. If you use somebody, especially when I find my students, a lot of times they use somebody else's painting, and what happens is they recreate that artist's mistakes. So, but
Mm-hmm.
I think we talked about this a little bit. It's like when I do my beer bottles, and like I said, I painted over 100 of them. Those I use um I use the bottles that are on, like, when I Google, because they really have photoshopped them. And usually what I do is I ask permission. So I'll send one of those things to the photographer, for I put it on their Facebook page. From that, a lot of them have, some said to me, like, could you never use that? Some say, could you only use that on certain quality paper? But I always ask permission from the original artist if I use it for something like that. Um, on a side note, like, it's just, to me, manners. Like, if you wouldn't go into somebody's house and just go into the refrigerator and take something. So if I'm right now, I'm using a demo for something I just found online. Now,
Hmm.
in this case, it's just type. And
Hmm.
I'm an old lady, okay? Nobody's going to go knocking on my door and say, I'm using this type that's not my own art, and put me in jail. Like, so if I was to sell something that I use, like Mickey Mouse, and and like people ask me this all the time because I do wacky things like Mickey Mouse in my paintings. They say, aren't you concerned that Disney's going to go after you? I go, they're not really going to go after somebody like me. Okay, but it's an integrity issue again. You know, like if I sold $100,000 worth of Disney paintings, they're going to come after me. You know, they're just going to tell you, please don't do it. But if you're using any of this art to learn, then it's fine because you're just learning it to you learn how to do something. Does that make sense?
Oh, perfect sense. Yeah. Thank you. So what
Okay, so
materials are you using right now?
right now I'm using pencil, and right now I'm just going to do this a little bit on sketch paper. And this is just to show you how easy it is to do an alphabet. And then after that, I have a little thing done here on watercolor paper. The paper I'm using is Stillman Bird sketchbooks. I just love them. And when I started doing my series of beer bottles, I started doing them in my sketchbook, and I did them on both sides. And it's just the vibrant of the colors, because it doesn't soak in, is just a lot of fun to use. And it really, for sketchbook paper, you could beat it to death. It is expensive. So when I'm doing an alphabet, if you notice, I put these lines here. It's very easy to do because it's a game. And I learned this when I was in advertising. So if I want to do an A, like first off, if I want to do a word, I first block the letters off. So let's say I'm going to do the hello. Always good to type, you know, always start off light. I have a lot of typos in my paintings too. So this kind of will tell me where the letters are. In a painting, sometimes I have to do this a few times because it doesn't come, you know, it doesn't come centered and all that. It's not as easy as it's going to look what I'm doing here. Now, if you're using, actually, I'm going to just do what I have here. Why am I going? So if you're using, so let's do the word hippies. Use the spacing that is whatever you're trying to copy. Like if you're doing a signage, I could tell you how to, don't take out a ruler or try to measure things because that will look wrong. You want to show your mistakes. So, and trust that the art director that did this knows how to do the spacing between words correctly. So you really just, so if I'm going to ignore that, I'm going to say H, and there's I there, P, I, E, S. And here's where the game comes in. All you have to do is squares. If I do a square here and a square here to this line, I now have an H. That's easy. That's just straight like that. If I want to do a P is just a square here and a rectangle here. And like magic, I have a P. Same thing here. It's a triangle here and a square. And then I have a P. So it's easy peasy. I in E, because we're just going to do the negative spaces, is two triangles. And the S, which is, you know, everybody say, oh, S is so hard to do. Not with this method. It's just a triangle here. No, square here, rectangle here, and there's my S. So you see how easy it is by doing this. Like if we take some of the hardest letters, like Z, all it is you got to make sure a triangle, 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 and then we have a Z. A Q, just a little bit like that. And there's my Q. So then if you want to get a little fancier, let's say with the P, for instance, we got the triangle. You could then make a circle here, make a circle there, and there you go. So if I had a word underneath it, right? I would again try to, I have a word, try to find out where the center is. U, S, E. And again, there's my U. There's a triangle there, triangle there. And there's my E. I was taught this with my first job in art director over 50 years ago. So again, like the spacing, one of the things is that you want to put a little bit more space in between words because you want it to be able to read. But you just try to do whatever's there and you'll be fine. So I quickly drew this one here. And then over here, I'm going to just do the same thing. H, I, P. We're just going to do hip here. Now, if again, like, I'm going to take my scrap out again. If I was, I'm going to do two little things here. If I was going to sketch up something for a layout, what I always do is that I see a lot of people do this. Let's say they spend like an hour making the perfect letter that they could ever do. And they don't want to erase it because they spend so much time. And then they keep making the most perfect letters. And then what happens is they run out of space. So then all of a sudden, see, they squeeze the letters in like that just to fit in, right? You know, like, have you ever spent like an hour making the perfect face and like really, and you don't want to erase it, so then you make a midget. So that's why I always slowly block it in. So that way I didn't spend too much time doing this commitment. And then I keep building it up together. So that way, when it's done, I don't have to erase it that much. I don't have to cry because that's where the therapy comes in a little bit, because you get so committed on what you're doing that you don't want to change anything. So going to the next part, we drew the letters, they're perfect. And over here, we're going to do a smaller one. You have a choice. And the choice is that either you're going to paint the background or you're going to paint the front. But you want to have a little texture or something. You take a big brush. I always tell people when it comes, and this is watercolor paper. I think I'm using 140 cold press. Well, I think I'm using Winsor Newton, or I usually use fabric, either Arches. It's
Mhm.
always good to do a demo in front of people with paper that you don't know that's going to work, just because it's something, it makes it more exciting, but anyhow.
So why are you using hot press rather than the cold press?
No, this is cold press.
Oh, it's cold press, but
Yeah.
oh, sorry, I thought you said hot press.
No, I wouldn't using it I do sometimes like using hot press. I love using all different types of paper, trying things out. But for a demo, hot press doesn't soak in. So it takes like a year and a half to dry. So if I'm doing a demo, I'd rather use cold press because it soaks in a little bit. So just so we don't have, but I like the effect of hot press at times, but it just takes a really long time to dry.
Okay.
So another tip I'm going to give you, when you watch demos of people, try looking at their palette all the time, because I find that like sometimes people don't mix enough paint. Learning how much paint to mix is really important. So again, like I don't really need that many colors. I don't use black. I don't use white. I'll only use white if I need to, because I'll do anything to fix a painting. So if I want to make my black, I usually take a brown and I'll take a blue, like a dark blue. And that's how I get the most beautiful blacks. Take for this, actually, I'm going to first paint a little texture thing on the background. So I'm going to keep it a little bit light. I paint with a lot of water.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask away.
Does everyone know what I'm going to have for dinner?
So what color is that? Is that turquoise or?
This is just it's the brown and the blue, and I added a little bit of the turquoise. Usually I find that, especially I use golden paints, and they dry pretty bright, but when I'm doing a demo, because of the lighting and everybody has different brands of paint, and especially in this case because it goes in RGB, so what you see is not what's here anyhow. So I like I rather people not get too caught up with what colors I'm using, because again, everybody has different brands. Notice how light this is, because if I'm going to put another layer on, the first layer I usually do is very watery. It's almost could be wet on wet. So that could be tea. Like the as if you're drinking tea, very light. So this is a brown, this is burnt sienna. I'm going to tell you my colors anyhow. I'm going to spell it wrong. And here's like I have to use colors that I can't pronounce.
Indigo?
Yeah. No, Indo.
I was gonna say indigo, but I guess it's not that.
No. It's a very dark blue. Anyhow, it could be, we'll say it's ultramarine blue.
Okay.
And if you mix those two together, you get black.
Hmm.
And this is teal, which is one of my favorite colors. Another thing, one of the best ways to get grays is don't clean your palette
Mm-hmm.
and just mix whatever you have there from your last painting, and you'll get a really beautiful gray.
Mm-hmm. I do the same. I use the gray that's on my palette. And you'd be surprised the beautiful shades of gray. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just gonna let this dry a little bit. That's true. So again, like in this one, I think I'm gonna paint the type here. Again, like to get the type, and I'll do this one first. And we'll just for fun's sake. Again, like you can see how much paint I'm mixing. Take a little of this pink. Oh. I'm gonna have
So does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, what type of brushes are these? I like how those brushes look.
Okay.
I know,
so
aren't
I
they
will,
beautiful?
yeah.
We have
Sorry
a
about that.
question. Oh, it's okay. We have a question for you though. We're admiring your paintbrushes. What kind are they?
Okay, that's a good question. I am a silver educator, and I'm also, but I knew nothing about paintbrushes.
Mhm.
And then somehow or other they asked me, these are silver black velvet brushes. And it took me a year to get used to them. But they are wonderful because they get the points back.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
so they're thick, they hold a lot of paint. But on the other hand, you could get that thin with a thick brush and that.
Are they synthetic brushes or natural or a combination?
A combination, if I'm correct, I should know that. I think it's a combination of synthetic and squirrel, if I'm correct.
Okay.
Quote me on that. They're professional brushes. I mean, they're not they're pretty like their lower end ones are the golden naturals, which aren't bad either. So they're not as expensive as squirrel and things like that, but they will last a lifetime. I've been trying to get rid, I've been trying, and they have also travel ones, but for me, I don't use, I'm a simpleton. I use very simple colors. I use very simple brushes.
Mhm.
I could, I don't need 900 different brushes to get a technique. I could use this and my credit card, and I'm happy as could be.
You use your
So
credit card for scratching for texture?
I use my credit card I use my credit card a lot for if I'm doing a tree.
Mm-hmm. For highlights and such?
I paint with it.
Oh, okay.
For instance, right here, for instance, it forces you to use a lot of paint. So I'll make things like that, and I'll use it a lot. In fact, I'll use it on this. So, like I said, it really holds a lot of paint. I do recommend them. again, now I'm going down, and this one here, I'm going down to like a milk level. And I'm just gonna throw colors in it and let it do whatever it wants to do.
Now, is your
I-
work flat or is it on an incline?
I do it both ways. If I'm doing something detailed, I do flat. If I'm starting a painting and I want it to drip around, I'll go like this to make things happen, and I'll do it more on a slant. And I'll use this credit card now to get some weird straight edges here. In fact, like when people give me gift cards, I'm more happy about the credit card than I am about the gift. So again, this is about milk. And again, look how much paint I have. That's the only way you're going to get a dark color is by using a lot of paint. And here I'm really going to let the paint do the work itself.
Is there a specific type of pencil you use for the outline, or does it matter?
It doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
I was going to paint the negative, and I didn't because my husband called. His sister's in the hospital, so that's why I picked it up. So I apologize for that.
Oh, no problem.
So again, like if I was to do the negative, which is what I was starting out as, if you're confident where your type is, and I have a pretty steady hand, some people might use masks to get the type right. I really, as methodical as I am, I just don't use too much mask. I don't need to. And whenever I do it with a demo, I have never failed. And it's not the mask, it has to be me, but it always rips my paper whenever I do a demo. So I'm very superstitious, so I stopped doing it. We see wherever the water is, that's only where it's going to go. So again, like you could either do either way. You want a little shadow on it to make it look 3D. If you have real small type in your image, what I usually do, let's say it says made in America, right? And it's really small, it's a bottle. If it's really, and you want to show something, I usually I'll do it right with the paint. There's this thing we call Greeking. So maybe I'll just do the first letter like that, and I'll Greek it like that. So it kind of looks like it. I'll put the lines there. So you think it's typed, but you don't have to worry about it being able to be read. If you type, and then this will be draw, I'll go with that. You know, if you're doing something in perspective, and if a lot of my paintings, you know, I love drawing, and I love doing things in perspective. That means your type will be in perspective. So you would draw your perspective lines in. You know, if I had one of my if you have a beer bottle, make sure that your type has a little curve too. Made it wine instead. So we got this little texture here. It's dry now. That's another thing that I always tell my students. If you wait till something dries each layer, they wouldn't need me to teach them anything. Because like, if you want something to be a little bit darker, you got to let the other layer dry.
Mhm.
Unless you want something like that. But if you want something, a hard shadow, you do it like that, it's going to end up, if I put it into it now, it's going to end up mud. And here I want some hard edges. And again, I'm just going to mix a gray. Throw it in here. Now I can sit down. Any questions?
Um, so when you start working on a painting, I remember when we were having a chat before, you do thumbnails and then value scales, and then you do your actual
I
piece. Like, what's your process when you
Let me see if I can find them. I do a lot of notes. Again, like right now, sometimes let me see, one that I'm working on now. I'll do color studies, try to figure out what colors, and I'll do a quick sketch like that. Because I want to know where my story is.
right.
Sometimes I'll do that in color. And sometimes I'll do it just in black and white. And another thing that I have been doing lately more than I used to do is that I do a lot of redos of my paintings because I find that if it's a subject I like, sometimes I'll do it better if I try it again and again. And again, like unless I'm doing a commission, which always gets a little tighter, I just paint to have fun or, for a show or something. I'm not worried about how many hours it's taking me to do a painting. My paintings are usually done when I'm bored. But I find, because I teach 3 classes, sometimes I give them the same project, and it fascinates me how each one looks completely different. So as you can see here, I'm just throwing in the paint. And one of the hardest things was for me was mixing enough paint so I don't get streaks. I don't really care I like watermarks. But if you notice that when I'm taking the paint now, I'm taking from wherever the puddle is and I'm moving with it.
Oh yeah, do you have any questions?
If not, I'll tell you how I met my husband, which is, or what's everybody having for dinner?
Chicken and potatoes for me.
I already ate.
So here I went out of the line, so who cares? With type, the more you don't make it perfect, the better it'll look. I did one painting and it had Hebrew in it.
Mhm.
And I am not, I can't read Hebrew anymore. So I had my friend who could read Hebrew proof it. But she was pregnant with twins. So might have not been the time to ask her to do it. So she did it and I had a show. And I kind of knew that if I had a show, that somebody would correct my Hebrew if it was wrong after the painting was done. So this man went up to me, he said, you know, you spelled this word wrong. And I said to him, I go, well, it's really not my problem anymore because somebody bought it. I asked my friend, I said, she goes, yeah, you reversed. Yeah, no, she goes, what's the big to do? I said,
It adds character to the painting.
most
I
people,
like seeing your studies.
thank you.
Yeah, it sort of brings everything together about where you're going with what you're doing, and because this is kind of a part of your process, right? Not the whole thing, obviously.
This part is the fun part of it. Like,
Mhm.
and to make it fun for me, because my brain is always working. Like right now, my brain is thinking what you're thinking. And now I'm thinking what you're thinking when I say that. So the beauty of painting is that you want to stop thinking, right?
Mm.
I try to do as much prep work as I can so I don't have to worry. Because and then when you start painting, even if you do as much prep work, nothing is set until it's out of your house or in the garbage. But I do a lot of prep work, especially about teaching more so because you want to you just don't you don't like surprises. But it also doesn't mean that I change my mind because I'm allowed to do that.
But it's good to have an idea of where you're heading.
Yeah. Again, because I don't want to have it, if I'm painting people in the middle of it, to have like some people, I would say like there's a big space there that you have to sneak in another person. After spending hours and hours on a painting, that's the last thing I want to do.
Well, it throws off your composition, or it could, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, or fix my composition. I don't want to have to do that at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yes. Do you think the painting is kind of the tip of the iceberg and all the prep and whatever is below water and what you have to do in order to make everything look like you'd like it to?
my process is kind of, I never know what it's going to look like at the end. Actually, no, that's not true. A few of my paintings, I could visualize at the beginning when I take the photograph. And when that has happened, those are usually the ones that have won awards. But normally I don't, I have to, I have a way of working is that first I do my sketch, then I draw it. And I spent like many, many hours like I may overdraw it a little bit. Then I never stay in the lines. but then I think I'm a photorealist and I try to draw it very tight. I start painting it, and then in the middle of the painting, I usually cry because I realize I'm not a photorealist. And then I say, well, then I, cry. And then afterwards I say, well, being Dorrie Rifkin isn't the worst thing in the world.
No, I
You
mean,
know, and
that's the great thing about painting and doing art. You get to show who you are, right? Represents you.
I was told I had a style, and that most people work their life to get one. And I had no choice but to paint that style. And I finally, it took me a long time to accept that I wasn't going to, that style was pretty okay. But did I answer your question, or
Yes, I think so. I mean, obviously you need preparatory work in order to know where you're going, but at the same time, you're freeing up your mind once you've arrived at a stage where you feel you can paint.
right.
And how do you know when you're done a painting? Because I know you do all the preliminary work, but as you're painting though, when do you know
I think
you're
that
finished?
that's a question for the scholars for the rest of their life. There was one painting, I thought I had a lot of work to do. And I post, and I don't do it as much, but I post half finished. I used to post, I thought I was posting a half finished painting. I had people that I did not know send me messages saying, you're done.
Mhm.
And I was like, no, I'm not done. I gotta do some more. They go, no, you're done. So I think that you get to a point when you're bored and
Mhm.
you see your messages there, then you have to show it to somebody that you trust. And then leave it for a few days after that. And if not, you add a little bit more, or you're done. Especially if I'm painting a painting that I'm having a lot of fun, I don't want it to end, so then I'll just start covering every area. But and I also deal with this with my seniors, because I try to tell them a lot of times it's very hard to be simple and to leave things. I said it's very easy to cover everything up.
So do you refer to your value studies when you're painting?
Yes, I try to. Sometimes I don't, because when I do that, that's when I get a good result. But a lot of times my value studies, because that's telling me where my story is, what's important to me. Like the study here, so I'll either do it or I'll do the complete opposite. But I'm always trying to. It's the advertising part of me. I'm trying to control what is important and like what you're going to leave with, like what my story is, and if I didn't keep looking at that, what happens is that you just start wanting to do everything again because it's fun.
So do you set limits for yourself then, or sort of parameters?
Sometimes I set limit by years, like of what I want to do. But my paintings, I'll work on a few at once. And when I just feel it's done, it's done. But like for instance, now I'm really focusing on painting shapes and looking for shapes. It's very hard. They always say it's a very easy concept, but it's not. It's very hard. And that to me is when I'm doing a painting, I'm looking, how do I make the story flow with shapes? For a few years, I was working on my darks. So every painting I did, I would do 20% darker than I would want, just to see how far I could go. For a while during COVID, I was working on trees because I'm a city girl, I really, hated painting trees. But then when I live in New Jersey, so we weren't going to the city at all during COVID. So I just started painting more trees. And if I want to look, texture it up a little bit.
So when you're working, what do you want to inspire in others when they look at your work?
What do I want to inspire in others?
Mhm.
That they can, and that I guess a lot of it is that I want them to look at it and be related to me. Meaning, like, if I'm doing a cityscape,
Mhm.
like, again, one of the things that goes through all my paintings is that my mom walked down that street. I want to be
Right.
able another person to say to me, hey, yeah, I've been down that street and I remember when that had something else. So it's always about connectivity for me.
And in your upcoming mentorship group, what do you want to inspire in the group members that join?
Self-expression,
Mhm.
not to be, I'm scared of my own shadow, but not to be scared to try new things.
Right.
Like, I find, like, in my classes, I have all levels, and I run my classes with community, meaning that everybody talks to each other, everybody gets inspired by showing everybody else what they do. And everybody helps each other, because I think that you learn more from looking at another person's painting than I could ever teach them. So that gives you a kind of, there we go. So again, if we want a little bit of a shadow here, and the reason why I use this, again, in my journey of when I was trying to learn to use darker colors, to make this little trick work, you gotta soak up a lot of paint with it, or else it's not gonna get dark enough. Not to be scared to
That's
try
really
new
great.
things. But yeah, and then the last thing I usually do, which is a lot more fun to do when you're at somebody else's studio than your own.
Mhm.
Something like this, just a little splash here and there. Again, not as much fun at your house when you have to clean it up. Really fun when I do a demo with somebody with a white shirt.
You
There you go.
definitely need an apron for that one.
Throw in a color that you don't think belongs. You can see I did not use that many colors, but it looks like I did.
Mhm. You can see so many, like there's so much depth in each letter.
Yeah.
Really pretty.
And it took me a lot of years. I hate to say it, to use, like, I see a lot of people, they think if they have this amount of blue that they could cover a whole background. Well, it took me more years than I would imagine to realize that you have to use a lot of paint, but then you can use it again. You just put the top on, use it again. I'm not a purist.
Mhm.
So I think I got any other questions?
No?
Anybody's gonna try to paint type now?
Yeah,
Well,
that's great.
remember the-
Thanks.
Well, I'm
Remember, it's a
really
light-
Do you
excited.
always frame your paintings?
Excuse me?
Do you always frame them under glass, or do you present them in a different way?
This is where my therapy comes in, okay? I when I only frame paintings if it goes in a show. So I use plexiglass, and I usually use a really thick white frame because I want to make sure that no other painting is going to steal from my thunder. And I usually do a very thin black frame because it's cheap. If I have I'm trying to make it as small as possible because I'm usually shipping it. I don't sign my paintings until I sell it, till it's out of my house or under a frame. And a lot of times, if I sell a painting, I prefer to sell it unframed because that way the person that frames it, they can frame it any way they want, and I could sell them cheaper. So that's usually the way I do it, because I'm always thinking about what it costs me and what it costs the person that's going to buy my painting.
Fair enough, yeah.
No. And again, how many paintings could I hang up in my house? So I don't, so again, like I use plexiglass. In fact, my husband, we had a glass frame that he just dropped. So,
Oh, yeah. Glass is heavy.
yeah.
So are there any other questions from the people that are on the call? Well, I'd like to
No,
thank,
not-
oh,
Sorry, I was just gonna say nothing for me, but thanks. This has been really, really great. Now I want to go paint type.
It's like I said, I've always loved, even when I was a kid, I just, as an art director, my specialty was logos and brochures and type, and making copywriters love me because I can make their type sing,
mhm.
so that's how it's, yes.
And I like how you incorporate that into painting, into your cityscapes and make it really pop, and you can actually feel the city, the life of the city, the vibrancy of the city come to life with the type.
And
Mhm.
it does give it a set of time because in the city, like if you do Broadway, not those shows change. So they're like, I've had people, they liked, let's say, Billy Elliot. They'll want to buy that painting even though it's 10 years later because it sets
Mhm.
that time when they had that experience.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. But before we go, I'd like to thank everybody for joining. But where can people find you on the social network or out there? How can people find you?
You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and my website. It's really catchy. It's DorrieRifkin.com. And if you find me there, you'll find me. You can connect with me there to Facebook. I don't know if I could. We could try this. If I put this
Here,
up here. Is that readable?
somewhat.
Well,
But I'm sure once we get to your website, we can find you on other platforms. And you can also find you on Mastrius, right?
Exactly.
So, Anne, are you familiar with Mastrius already?
Yes, to a point. I don't have a mentor at the moment. I'm checking people out.
Oh, great. I hope you join us on May 13th. That's when our group starts. Hope you see you there. You know how to find masters on the website as well?
Yes, you can put in various criteria.
Names.
I did it once and it didn't work out, but that's not to say I couldn't try it again.
And if you have any questions, you could either reach out to me or reach out to Pat, or anything you want to, if you want, even if you want to know what to eat for breakfast tomorrow. A lot of comes in.
Okay, well, thank you very much for everybody for joining us, and have a good night.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.